The year is 283 AC. The Trident runs red. Two men stand in that river, one a rebel lord who fights for vengeance, for his stolen betrothed, for a kingdom tired of dragon kings. The other, a prince, a poet, a warrior. A man who some say had prophecy burning behind his eyes. Robert Baratheon raises his warhammer. Rhaegar Targaryen raises his sword. And in our history, the history of Westeros as we know it, the hammer connects. Rhaegar falls, rubies scatter into the current. The Targaryen dynasty dies in that river, one splash at a time. But what if it didn't? What if, in the span of a single moment, Rhaegar's blade found Robert's throat first? What if the man who started this war was also the man who ended it? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating what-if scenarios in all of ASOIAF lore. What if Rhaegar Targaryen won the Battle of the Trident? What does Westeros look like in the days, months, and years that follow? Who lives? Who dies? And, perhaps most importantly, what kind of king does Rhaegar become? Let's find out. Before we go forward, we need to go back. Robert's rebellion didn't happen in a vacuum. It was years in the making, a slow build of resentment, royal madness, and one fateful night at Harrenhal. When Rhaegar Targaryen crowned Lyanna Stark the Queen of Love and Beauty at the Harrenhal tourney, passing over his own wife, Elia Martell, he didn't just humiliate a princess, he lit a fuse. Then came the alleged abduction. Lyanna, gone. Her father, Lord Rickard Stark, and brother Brandon demanding answers from King's Landing, and the Mad King burning them alive for their insolence. Jon Arryn, foster father to Ned Stark, and Robert Baratheon refused to hand his wards over for execution, and so a rebellion was born. The rebels House Stark, House Baratheon, House Arryn, and eventually House Tully and House Lannister swept across Westeros. They won at Summerhall, they won at Ashford, and they were heading toward King's Landing. The Battle of the Trident was the last real chance to stop them. Rhaegar had been away, whether voluntarily or hiding with Lyanna in the Tower of Joy. The texts are debated, but he returned. He gathered a Targaryen host, and he met Robert's army at the ford of the Trident. In our timeline, Robert won, decisively. But now, let's flip it. How does Rhaegar actually win? The canonical account of the battle is brief. Robert and Rhaegar met in single combat in the river. Both were wounded. Robert's chest was caved in by Rhaegar's lance earlier in the battle. He was fighting through serious injury, so the margin was already thin. In our alternate timeline, maybe Rhaegar's training as a warrior, which by all accounts was exceptional, makes the difference in those final seconds. Maybe Robert's injury slows him by half a step. Maybe Rhaegar's blade finds the gap in Robert's armor before the warhammer can connect. Robert Baratheon dies in the Trident. His body is swept downstream. Now this is crucial. The rebel host doesn't immediately collapse. These are battle-hardened men who believe in their cause. But the psychological blow of losing their figurehead, their most fearsome warrior, is enormous. Ned Stark, commanding the northern flank, learns of Robert's death mid-engagement. He has a choice: press on or signal retreat to regroup. In this scenario, Ned falls back. He's pragmatic. He knows that without Robert, the rebellion loses its beating heart. He needs to reassess. The Targaryen host holds the Trident. The tide of the war has just turned. Rhaegar wins the battle, but he doesn't win the war. Not yet. 3 crises face him immediately. Crisis 1, his father, the Mad King. Aerys II Targaryen sits on the Iron Throne in King's Landing. He is unpredictable, paranoid, and dangerous. He has wildfire caches planted beneath the city. And he has a small council that is terrified of him. Rhaegar has always understood, perhaps better than anyone, that his father is the real enemy of the realm's stability. There are even accounts suggesting Rhaegar had spoken with lords about the possibility of a great council to potentially replace Aerys. He knew the crown was rotten at its source. Now, riding back toward King's Landing as a military victor, Rhaegar faces an impossible question. Does he let his father continue to rule? In our alternate timeline, Rhaegar moves quickly. He rides to King's Landing not as a conquering hero, but as a son and as a prince who understands that the realm cannot survive another decade of Aerys. The question is whether he deposes his own father or waits for him to die. Crisis 2, the rebel lords. The rebellion isn't fully crushed. Ned Stark still has an army in the north. Jon Arryn holds the Eyrie. House Tully is battered but intact. Robert's brothers Stannis and Renly are young but alive. Rhaegar cannot simply execute them all. For one thing, it would be a political catastrophe. For another, it's simply not in his character. By all accounts, Rhaegar was thoughtful, even merciful. He needs to offer terms, real terms, not the hollow promises his father made before burning lords alive. Crisis 3. Lyanna Stark. She is at the Tower of Joy, presumably pregnant with Rhaegar's child, a child that, in our timeline, becomes Jon Snow. The nature of Rhaegar and Lyanna's relationship is one of the great debates of ASOIAF fandom. Was she abducted? Did she go willingly? Did they love each other? For the purposes of this scenario, let's follow what the books most strongly imply. That Lyanna went with Rhaegar of her own accord, that there may have been a secret marriage, and that a child was coming. This child changes everything. Let's assume Rhaegar is everything his admirers claimed. Brilliant, compassionate, visionary. What kind of political settlement does he craft? Step 1. Sidelining Aerys. Rhaegar's first and most urgent task is neutralizing his father. He cannot rule effectively with Aerys on the throne, lighting wildfire rumors and executing lords who look at him wrong. The most likely path. Rhaegar engineers a regency. Aerys, whose mental state has clearly deteriorated, is persuaded, perhaps with the support of key members of the small council and the Kingsguard, to step back from active governance. He remains king in name. Rhaegar rules as Prince Regent. This is the cleanest solution. It preserves Targaryen legitimacy without requiring patricide, and it gives Rhaegar the authority to negotiate. Aerys would likely rage. He might even attempt to use the wildfire caches. This is the greatest danger point. A cornered Aerys is a catastrophically dangerous Aerys. In our scenario, let's say Rhaegar moves fast enough and has enough loyal Kingsguard to prevent the worst. The city is not burned. The Mad King is confined to his chambers. History records it as a voluntary retirement for reasons of health. Step 2. The Great Council. Rhaegar almost certainly convenes a Great Council. We know from historical precedent that Great Councils can resolve legitimacy crises and settle succession disputes. Rhaegar, who was reportedly interested in exactly this kind of political reform even before the war, would see this as an opportunity. He invites every major lord. The rebels are given safe conduct. Ned Stark, Jon Arryn, Hoster Tully, they come. Wary, but they come, because the alternative is more war, and they've just lost their best warrior. At the council, Rhaegar makes concessions. Real ones. He acknowledges the grievances that sparked the rebellion. He acknowledges carefully, diplomatically, that his father's reign caused harm. He doesn't grovel, but he bows his head. He also presents evidence of his marriage to Lyanna. This is politically explosive. It means he set aside Elia Martell, a princess of Dorne. The Martells are furious, but Rhaegar argues it was a legitimate marriage under specific circumstances, with a specific purpose. The prophecy of the prince that was promised. 3 heads of the dragon. 3 children. Whether the lords believe him or not, it changes the calculus. Lyanna is not a victim to be rescued. She is, by Rhaegar's account, his queen. Step 3. The terms for the rebels. Rhaegar's settlement with the rebel lords is generous, strikingly so. Ned Stark is granted full amnesty and returns to Winterfell as Lord of the North. There is no vengeance for the rebellion. Rhaegar understands that punishing Ned would only create new martyrs and new grievances. Jon Arryn remains Warden of the East and Lord of the Eyrie. He is old. He will not rebel again. House Tully retains its position. Hoster Tully's daughters, one married to a Stark, one to an Arryn, remain as they are. The thorniest issue, House Baratheon. Robert is dead, but Stannis and Renly live. Storm's End stood through the rebellion. Rhaegar faces a question. Does he punish the Baratheon name for Robert's rebellion? In this scenario, Rhaegar is pragmatic. He confirms Stannis as Lord of Storm's End. The Baratheons bent the knee. They are allowed to survive, stripped of some lands perhaps, but not destroyed. What about Jon Arryn's ward, the young Robert's allies? Without Robert to rally around, they are simply young lords. They grow up in a world where the Targaryens still rule. Resentment may fester, but it doesn't erupt. Now we come to the most personal and most consequential element of this entire scenario. Lyanna Stark survives. In our timeline, Lyanna dies reportedly of fever and blood loss after childbirth in the Tower of Joy. Ned finds her dying in a bed of blood. She makes him promise something, and that promise shapes everything. In our alternate timeline, Rhaegar is alive. He can ride to Dorne himself. There is no reason for the Tower of Joy to remain a secret. There is no reason for Ned to smuggle a baby north under an assumed name. Lyanna survives, or at least has a far better chance of surviving because she has access to proper maesters, proper care, the resources of a royal household rather than a remote tower with 3 Kingsguard knights and presumably minimal medical support. The child is born a boy. Let's call him Aemon, as some fans theorize Rhaegar might have chosen for Aemon the Dragon Knight, or perhaps Jaehaerys. Whatever his name, he is Rhaegar's true-born son by a second wife. This child is now the heir to the Iron Throne, above Viserys, above Aegon Rhaegar's son by Elia Martell, and that creates a catastrophic succession problem. The Dornish will never accept it. Elia Martell, set aside for a Stark girl, her children displaced by a new heir. The Prince of Dorne would view this as an unforgivable insult. Oberyn Martell, volatile, brilliant, deadly, would be furious. Rhaegar must navigate this with extraordinary care. His likely solution, Aegon remains the designated heir. The child with Lyanna is given a lord's name, maybe not even publicly acknowledged as fully legitimate, or legitimized in a way that places him third in line. Lyanna is treated as a queen in private, but the official story is complicated. It's a political mess, but it's a survivable mess, which is more than could be said for the actual timeline. We haven't talked about the Lannisters. In our timeline, Tywin Lannister famously waited until the very last moment to commit his forces and then sacked King's Landing for the rebels, ostensibly arriving as friends before turning on the city. The Mountain slaughtered Elia and her children. Jaime killed Aerys. In our alternate timeline, Aerys never opens the gates to the Lannisters. The Battle of the Trident has gone the other way. Tywin, ever calculating, would have read the situation differently. A Targaryen victory at the Trident means, do not march on King's Landing. Do not commit to the rebels. Wait. Tywin is nothing if not a survivor. He would keep his 12,000 men at home, send polite ravens to both sides, and watch to see who would win. When Rhaegar wins, Tywin pivots. He sends congratulations. He offers the Lannisters loyalty. He might even offer Cersei, already promised to the crown in our timeline, as a gesture of goodwill. Here's where it gets interesting. Does Rhaegar accept Cersei as a match? For Viserys, perhaps? In our timeline, Aerys rejected Cersei for Viserys, supposedly saying he wouldn't give a servant's daughter to the heir. But Rhaegar might see strategic value in binding the Lannisters. Cersei Lannister, in this world, never becomes queen. She marries Viserys, or some other lord. Her children never sit the Iron Throne. Jaime Lannister never kills Aerys because, in this scenario, Aerys never issues the order to burn the city, or is stopped before he can act on it. Jaime remains a Kingsguard, his secret shame unexploded. He lives a different life entirely. Tyrion is born, Joanna Lannister dies, and Tywin's relationship with his youngest son remains as cold and poisonous as ever. Some things don't change. What about the Starks? Ned returns to Winterfell. He is not haunted by a promise to a dead sister because Lyanna lives. He does not carry a secret that defines his entire relationship with honor and identity. He marries Catelyn Tully, as in our timeline the match was arranged before the war, after all, and it survives the peace settlement. They have children, Robb, Sansa, Arya, Bran, Rickon. But the North is different now. Ned knows as perhaps one of the few people who does the full truth of what happened between Rhaegar and Lyanna. He watched his sister choose this. He knows about the child. He carries that knowledge, but it's not a secret that could topple a dynasty, because the dynasty survived. Lyanna herself is a fascinating figure in this alternate world. A Stark girl from the North, now a royal consort, politically complicated, perhaps not fully accepted at court, but alive. Fierce and alive. What kind of woman does she become, given the chance to grow into her own story? The books hint at her spirit, her skill with weapons, her resemblance to Arya. In this world, she gets to be that person. She gets decades rather than a moment. Let's fast forward. Aerys dies, perhaps peacefully, perhaps not. Rhaegar takes the throne officially. What kind of king is he? This is where fan theories diverge most sharply. Rhaegar is lionized in the books, spoken of in almost mythic terms by those who knew him. Sir Barristan Selmy considers him the finest man he ever knew. Even his enemies concede his brilliance. But brilliance doesn't always make a good king. Rhaegar was introspective, consumed by prophecy. He believed himself and later his children to be the prince that was promised, the hero meant to face the long night. This isn't the mindset of a man focused on grain prices and trade disputes. His reign would likely be stable in the short term. The settlement with the rebel lords holds. He's a capable administrator with good advisors. He doesn't burn people alive for sport. But the prophecy obsession would drive him. He would likely push significant resources into understanding the threat from the north, the others, the long night. In our timeline, the Watch had been declining for decades. Nobody took them seriously. A King Rhaegar might actually listen when the Watch sends ravens about dead men rising. And here's a chilling thought. In our timeline, Jon Snow, Rhaegar's hidden son, grows up at the Wall, becomes Lord Commander, and is the first highborn in generations to truly understand the threat from the north. His entire arc is shaped by his bastardy, his outsider status, his need to prove himself. In our alternate timeline, that boy doesn't need to prove himself at the Wall. He's a prince. He might never go north at all. Does that mean the White Walker threat gets handled better, with royal resources and royal authority? Or does it get ignored precisely because the person most destined to see it clearly never goes to the place where he would learn? Prophecy is tricky that way. Let's talk about some of the people who live completely different lives in this world. Daenerys Targaryen is never exiled. She grows up in court, a princess. She doesn't go through the crucible of exile, of surviving Viserys' cruelty, of emerging from fire with dragons. Does she ever become Daenerys Stormborn, breaker of chains? Or is she simply a noblewoman, politically arranged, never touching the edges of her own potential? Viserys Targaryen doesn't become the petty, broken king he was in our timeline, a man warped by years of exile and entitlement. He grows up at court, for better or worse, shaped by real power rather than the dream of power. Does he become less cruel without exile to poison him? Possibly. Is he still his father's son in temperament? Also possibly. Jon Snow, Rhaegar's son by Lyanna, grows up as a prince, not a bastard. He has a different name, a different life, a different set of challenges. His entire identity in our timeline is built around the question of who he is. Here, he knows. The question becomes, what does he do with it? Cersei Lannister never becomes queen. Whether she's married off to Viserys or some other lord, she is never the power behind the throne, never the mother of Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen. The particular poison of her reign, the cruel, beautiful, narcissistic queen regent, never happens. Does Cersei, without the Iron Throne to fixate on, find something else to be? Or does her nature always find a way to tragedy? Jorah Mormont never sells slaves, never goes into exile, never falls in love with a silver-haired queen. He lives out his days at Bear Island, hunting, perhaps happy, perhaps bored. Petter Baelish Littlefinger never gets his hands on the levers of power. The chaos he cultivated so carefully in our timeline, the chaos he called a ladder, never materializes in quite the same way. But men like Littlefinger find their opportunities wherever they are. He's still dangerous, just differently dangerous. That's our deep dive into what a Rhaegar victory at the Trident might have looked like. If you enjoyed this, there are several rabbit holes we didn't even get to what happens to the Iron Islands, how the Faith reacts to Rhaegar's second marriage, whether the dragons ever hatch in this alternate world. If you want to follow up covering any of those threads, let us know in the comments. And if you're new here, this channel is for people who want to go deep into the lore, the history, the theories, the what-ifs that George R.R. Martin left scattered through the text like rubies in a river. Subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.